Welcome to Every Night is Game Night, where two busy dads get games to the table by any means necessary. Check us out, along with other great podcasts, at dicetowernetwork.com.
Every Night is Game Night, episode 153, Beyond the Hotness and Second Chance Shelf with Jordan Shoenberger. Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome back to the Every Night is Game Night podcast. I'm your host, Jason. Thank you so much for joining us. You guys know how I roll over here in ENGN. I cast the net far and wide. I've always loved to get new voices, new perspectives on the show. This week, we have a person who has yet to appear on the podcast, a brand new guest. He is from the Dice Tower. He runs the Second Chance Shelf segment. I've been talking to him. He's a really cool guy. I'm looking forward to having him in the co-host chair. And we're going to share about some old games. Please welcome to Jordan Shoenberger. Welcome.
All right. Thanks, Jason.
Running Second Chance Shelf, talking about old games. So Second Chance Shelf is what you call it. We call it Beyond the Hotness, where we go back and kind of talk about, games that are in the top 20, things that have kind of fallen off the shelf, things that have, kind of puttered along and, under people's radar, so to speak. So we're going to get a chance to talk about all that stuff. But first, before we get into anything, please introduce yourself and let us know, where you're from and how you got into this whole board gaming content creation thing.
Yeah, cool. So my name's Jordan Shoenberger. I do Second Chance Shelf on Board Game Breakfast with the Dice Tower, and I have a YouTube channel that I have about 0 followers, but I have some videos up on there. I usually do, mostly my stuff's on Instagram.
I'm beating you by 4. My YouTube has 4 followers.
So we're even. Perfect. So yeah, my Instagram account is more so where it's at. I am a gamer in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I mostly play Euro games, some abstract games, light family kind of games. I'm married with a couple kids, so the gaming is not as prevalent as it used to be. But I have been playing hobby games since about 2009, which I feel is probably when the Euro game boom was really solid. So I got into those games pretty deep at that point. Still playing a lot of those games, and then new games keep coming out, so you never have to run out of games to play.
All right, so we're going to get into a lot of that stuff that you were talking about. We're talking about second chance games, why not first chance games? So we're going to get into some concrete reviews. We're not just here for an interview, man. We're going to put you to work. We're going to make you review some games. I know you enjoy that from judging it by your content. But first, here on Every Night is Game Night, we have a Kickstarter segment that we run every week with our friend, fellow Dice Tower personality, Liz Davidson. Liz, share about another awesome Kickstarter, please.
Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm here to encourage your Every Night is Game Night acquisition disorder. This week I want to talk about Merchant's Cove, a Euro game in which you are not a fantasy adventurer, but rather a merchant who collects as much of their hard-earned money as possible. Each merchant sells different goods and has a different way of making them, so if you've ever wanted to be an alchemist or a fantasy blacksmith, then now is your chance. You'll also be working against the clock, struggling to create your wares in time to sell them, while also rushing to attract the most desirable customers. If you're looking for a Euro game with a cool theme and asymmetric player roles, then Merchant's Cove might be for you. Check it out before the campaign ends on September 11th. Happy gaming!
All right, so thank you very much, Liz, for another Kickstarter. Funny that I have this Kickstarter segment that's right here at the beginning of the show, and then I have a person here whose theme is kind of talking about these, older games. So let's just jump right into it. Let's jump into, before we get into the reviews, and we're going to review some games, some very under the radar games. If you want to, I have them listed in the show notes, but we'll go on. I'm hesitating to name them because I think Jordan's going to surprise me. I've made some requests, and we'll see what exactly is going to turn up. But so how do you deal with Call to the New? How do you deal with new Kickstarters? How do you deal with all this kind of new stuff? Do you have a like a philosophical kind of approach to all that? Do you just like let them go, or how do you approach all that stuff?
Yeah, so I up front, I've backed one Kickstarter ever.
Oh my God.
One. It was on tour by boardgametables.com. It is fantastic. It's a roll and write game, which I know people are all abuzz right now, but it's a good one. So I have only backed one Kickstarter ever. I feel like it comes down to supply and demand. So I don't have a lot of supply of money. However, the demand of games is high. So when I buy a game, I'm going to put a lot of work into learning about games before I purchase them. And so I am often looking for games that have stood the test of time, or people who I respect have put out, good reviews about, or have, shared their thoughts about. So I'll do a lot of research before I purchase games. So a lot of times I steer away from Kickstarter games because I don't have a lot of that really great information to make what I feel is the most educated decision I can. I know I can see like the components, I can see, some gameplay and a preview, but a lot of times the designer might not be proven. It might be a new publisher that I don't know what their component quality is really going to be like. Rule books might not be finished. And when it's all said and done, it's kind of a crapshoot. You don't know what you're really going to get. It is, there's some risk taking when it comes to Kickstarters, and I am generally pretty risk adverse. So I like to take on new, proven commodities. I will stick with companies that I respect. I'll, follow up with designers that I respect. Not to say that I don't play new games, because I love new games and I buy new games fairly frequently, but a lot of times, there are games that there are so many games out there, and even if a game came out in 2012 and I still may not have played it, and it's new to me, right, and that game still exists. So it's not like that game is no longer worth playing. It still exists. So
I think there's like this idea that like if a game is 2012 and it isn't expanded or second edition, or like it's not in the consciousness, then there's this idea maybe that the community has decided that this game is not worthy of being, kind of in the forefront or something like that. So it's almost like there's this resistance to playing the older game, or maybe there's a game that's in like a bargain shelf. Like, I think of a game, this wasn't that long ago, but it's called Escape from 1 Million BC. I played it a couple years ago. It was this kind of big cooperative, whatever. And, I played it, I enjoyed it, but didn't sell well. You could buy it from bargain basement bin for like $3. So I put it on a geek list recently of like played co-op games, and people are like, wow, you played this. This is great. And it's like, okay, it is great, or not. I wouldn't say great, but it's good. Like it's a solid family, kooky fun. But people look at it and they say, it wasn't expanded. It's old. It fell off the map. Not even going to give it a second chance. So I imagine that's what the point of your thing is.
Yeah.
To give it a second chance. But what do you think about that? Like, do you kind of like wince a little bit when you hear that like response to an older game?
Yeah, I think there's some truth to it, because I do think some games do fall into obscurity for a reason. It's like there's sometimes like that restaurant that you always drive past and you don't ever see anybody in.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a reason nobody's going to that restaurant, right? So maybe it's not appealing looking. Maybe the food just isn't that great. Maybe like there's this restaurant by our house, and it's been like this establishment in our neighborhood for like 20 some years. And my wife and I went there once because they had like, oh, new chef, new menu. And I was like, okay, let's try it out. We went in there and we hated the food and we just stopped. So we never went back, right? And then the restaurant went out of business like 2 years later. And everybody on like the neighborhood Facebook page is like, we need to get the Getaway Cafe back, get new owner. And I was like, it wasn't worth keeping. If the food isn't good, it's not worth going back to. So, I think there's some truth to that for some games. But I think sometimes, there's just so much coming out now. It's hard to, it's hard for
Right.
people to keep up. And so it's easier to toss aside a game that isn't brand new. Because, there's some excitement for getting a new game. I get excited when I get a new game.
Right. I think that was true a little bit earlier, like in 2011, 2012. If a game was from 2006, then it's like, whatever. But nowadays,
Yeah.
there's so much stuff that there's some really, really great things that are just not being played. I actually enjoyed the games that I'm going to talk about. I actually enjoyed them, for them. They're niche.
Yeah.
And that's probably the best way to think of it is like, you may not be getting like the hottest game or whatever, but you might be getting some niche thing that hits right in your bullseye,
Exactly. I remember when I first started playing games and I was talking to like buddies from college who had no understanding of this hobby. And I'd often referred to them as like obscure European board games. Like that's how I would always describe it, because
like a wine or like fashion,
right?
like
Because they had no understanding. Like my friends weren't like, I wasn't like a D&D player or a Magic player or anything like that. Like we were just kind of typical run-of-the-mill guys. And so like if I was like, so it's like Dungeons and Dragons or Magic, and they're like, yeah, that's super weird. So I would like describe it in a way that was like kind of more hip or more cool. Didn't convince anybody to play them. But like, I think that was like the niche of games that I was in. I think some people come at it with different backgrounds and different, entryways into the hobby. And so, I think that is still probably my niche. And I still enjoy like diving back and playing some of those games that I missed over the years. Like I still have Voyages of Marco Polo. I never played it. It's still on my shelf, and I can't wait to play it. But
Sure.
That's even one of those games. I think it's in the BGG top 100. It has stood the test of time, and I still haven't gotten around to it because there's so many games out there. So I can't fault anybody for not playing older games, but I do think they're missing out. If there's ever a post on Facebook, they're like, I've never played Catan. Should I play Catan? I'm like, yeah, you should play Catan.
Of course you should.
It's a game worth playing,
Yeah.
Sure, you should play Carcassonne. I don't care if you just got in the hobby last year. I don't think you should feel pressured to play Carcassonne, but it's a game worth playing. If you are interested in playing that game, you should play it. If you have no interest in playing Carcassonne, you think it looks like a bore because it's drab and it's just tiles and the meeples are plain, like, fine, just don't play it. I don't care. But if you have an interest in playing it, you should definitely play it because I think it's a game worth playing.
I'm so glad you mentioned Facebook because like that on one hand, it's amazing to get some recommendations there. You post and people have all these recommendations, but on the other hand, the recommendations will skew new, or they'll skew to like the really super well known. Which Tiny Epic, and they give you the run. Like we get that thread every freaking day on some thread. It's like, okay, rank your Tiny Epics, and it's like, this is very exciting. Or like, or like you say, like they'll skew like really really new or the things that people are playing, and then they'll someone will say, okay, play Catan or play Dominion. They name a deck builder, play Dominion. They're like, no, don't play Dominion, play something else.
Right,
play Dominion.
Why not? Dominion's a great game. There's nothing.
Just do it.
There's nothing bad about Dominion. Okay, there's something bad about Dominion, but it's worth playing.
Yeah, exactly. Personally,
yeah,
I've moved on, but for you.
Yeah,
you don't have to move. Go on your own journey, young person. Anyway, so we, in that spirit, we wanted to come at you. So we're both reviewers, and we both just love talking about games and the games that have been, hitting our table and we're having a lot of fun with. So I have a couple of games that I have that are old and they have people don't talk about for a little while, and Jordan has a couple of games. So we'll go back and forth. So let me go back. I think I have the earliest game. I think I have the oldest game. So I'm going to jump into the first one and go from there. So cool. My game is from 1980. Do you have a game that you're going to review that's older than 1980?
No.
Got it.
No.
I win.
My games are old in the view of somebody who plays board games right now.
Right.
So my games might be in kindergarten.
Right. So I did a big geek list. I love cooperative games are my favorites. I want to play every single co-op game and rank them. So I did a giant geek list, and obviously people, what's the thing you do when you make a big geek list? Oh, you're missing this one. You're missing this one.
Right.
So one person made a suggestion, and I didn't think nothing of it, but I'm like, oh, 1980? They made a co-op game in 1980? It's not really a co-op game. It's a solo game. It is called Citadel of Blood. Okay. Which will henceforth be known as Citadel of Blood. Because I can't say that game. I cannot say that name without like a little bit of gravitas over there.
It's so dramatic.
So dramatic. So anyway, Citadel of Blood is a modular dungeon crawling game that was originally printed in Ares magazine in 1980. So these were these trade magazines. I think Ares was an offshoot of it was fantasy, but like it was an offshoot of like a sci-fi thing going on. And they used to print just like these modular little games that you can either cut out or, they point you to some, take these components from your house and, put them together and you can make a game or something like that. Mm-hmm. So this game is basically a dungeon crawler using a simple system that was originally a war game, but porting it over to this kind of dungeon crawling motif. It's solo, fully solo. It's co-op in the sense that like more people can play it, but like it's basically a solo game. And you're a delvers in a dungeon. That's what you do. You have 6 adventurers, and they're like warrior and wizard and more warrior and, and bigger wizard and whatever. Super simple. Like, and you're writing your stats down on a sheet of paper. You need a pencil and paper for this. And you're going to be walking through a modular dungeon, and you're going to be flipping tiles. And they're the little tiny little tiles, and you can either run into a hallway and, you have wandering monster check, or you run into like an item and you have to interact with the item. It's just procedurally generate a kind of a roguelike, only with a point. So you're going into this dungeon, and eventually you have to like kind of find the Hellgate and then defeat that whatever's in front of the Hellgate and then get out. So I don't know if you've ever played games like this, because you said that you're a Euro person, but like in terms of what they call quote unquote Ameritrash, this is what they talk about. Okay. Rolling. You roll D6 every single time you flip over a tile, because you have to check for wandering monsters, and you have to consult a table. So like it's had that D&D flair of like everything has a table, Appendix N, Appendix O, Appendix P. And everything is random. So I know you said you weren't a D&D guy, but have you ever been exposed to that kind of gameplay? And what do you think of it?
I'm not against that kind of gameplay. I just don't really have the people around me that like those kind of games. So I think my brother growing up used to play D&D, but I never played with him. So I'm somewhat familiar with it, but I've never done it myself.
Mm-hmm. So, like, what I appreciate about this game, and it's not a great game, believe me. I mean, when you roll that much, there is a point at which there's this sense of, like, just kind of fatigue that sets in. It's like, okay, I'm rolling for everything, and where is my real agency here? But what it does do, and this is, like, the reason why I wanted to review this game is just to kind of make a broader statement about how sometimes older designs can kind of have something that newer designs miss. And what I feel is this older design just has that sense of exploration. Like you turn over a tile and you're rolling and you really don't know because the game doesn't know. Like you haven't determined it yet. And I feel like in a lot of like kind of newer designs, the emphasis is toward like kind of balance and, strategy and everything that they lose that kind of sense of anything can happen and like this sense of wonder. And you get that in a game like this, and it's so simple. It's like you can literally print out a page and cut out the little squares, and that you play. But because you can really roll a series of things where it's like you can uncover a tile. Here comes a Minotaur, and okay, we're gonna negotiate with the Minotaur. It's like, why are we negotiating with Minotaur? Because I don't want to fight him. What's his negotiate skill? Let me look up his negotiate skill. I'm gonna roll against that. He has a +7 to negotiate. What's going on here?
Right.
I thought it was the Minotaur. Let's bribe him. You can bribe him. Yes, there's a chart for that.
So does it feel like there's a lot of like having to do like a lot of cross-referencing?
A ton. It's half the game. But I guess what emerges from that mess is a more memorable kind of thematic, wild experience than like I recently played a game. Lord of the Rings: Journeys of Middle Earth.
Okay.
You've of course
I've
heard
heard
of
of
it.
it. Yeah, I haven't played it. But...
All app based and has supposed to have that sense of exploration, but not really, because a lot of stuff is in the app, and it's more like kind of jiggering with your hand as opposed to kind of exploring and having these really noteworthy experiences. So not a great game, but it does one thing super well that may be lost in newer designs, I feel. So I wanted to mention it here. So that is Citadel of Blood. It's available a lot of places. You can probably just get download the PNP file and, cut it up and check it out. We are going to review a game that's a lot like it, called Legends Untold in a couple episodes. Maybe we've done it already. I don't know. I'm recording a lot of episodes at once, so I don't know which one is happening. I think we will have done that already, now that I think of it. But so that sense of like card-based exploration, we're gonna go back there at ENGN. So that's what's gonna happen. So great. So that is my game. My friend, you have a game for me as well. I hope it is the game that I am.
So I will oblige, and I did the work to dig up Welcome to Walnut Grove.
Yes, you did it. You did it. Thank you so much.
I did it. I was up late last night, but we're good. I got this.
So Walnut Grove is it was a game that appeared on our top 100 solo games, because we do that list every year with Kevin Erskine, and all of us were like, "What? What is this? I've never heard of this." And of course, Kevin laughs knowingly. He's like, "Yeah, it's an older game. No one, whatever." And I'm thinking, Jordan,
he put the game on the list.
It was voted on.
It was voted on. Okay, gotcha.
It was voted on. So a lot of solo games tend to be a little bit, they skew a little bit, kind of towards older titles and everything. That list doesn't change a lot from year to year. Mm-hmm. It's like a people's choice. And I figured Jordan is here. He likes these second chance games. Did he play it? Yes, he did it.
I love Welcome to Walnut Grove. So this is good.
Cool.
It doesn't get to the table a lot because there's hundreds of games. So, yeah. So Welcome to Walnut Grove. It's the original Welcome to game. Before the House Roll and Write game and before the Dino World, we were going to Walnut Grove. So this was a 2011 game by Lookout Games. It was designed by Paul Lane, who's best known for Welcome to Walnut Grove. And Tuco Takotaleo, who's best known for Eclipse. So imagine the guy who did Eclipse making this like straightforward German-style Euro game with art by Clemens Franz. Mm-hmm. You can imagine that world. That's where this game is sitting. So in Walnut Grove.
And for people who aren't familiar with Clemens Franz, like what's his vibe? What do we know him from?
Yeah, so he did Agricola, he did Le Havre, he did Clans of Caledonia.
Very pastoral, very,
Yeah, it has a cartoon vibe to it, but also kind of like serious at the same time, even though it's still cartoony. Very portrait-based. A lot of the cards have like faces on them of the different people. He did like Lorenzo El Magnifico. A lot of those kind of straight Euro games. He's the artist of. A lot of people don't like it just because of how kind of stiff the people look, but I really enjoy it. I think it's really very charming.
Sure.
Yep. So in Walnut Grove, you take the role of a Midwestern family. You're visiting town. You are working the land to create a new life in the new world. And of course, you're trying to earn the most victory points, like all those families did back then.
Yes.
The victory points. So in the game, each player gets a board that represents their homestead. It has, along at the top of the board, has some spaces that match the pasture tiles. And then along the bottom, there are spaces for buildings and fires as well that you're going to be using to develop your homestead. And then in the middle of the table, there's a shared town board that has action spaces around the edge. And these action spaces, they form a worker placement rondelle. And if you don't know, a rondelle is kind of a path that the players will move around to either collect resources or take actions, but you have to follow the path. It's not like a general worker placement game where you can go anywhere. With a rondelle, you have to move around the path.
Okay, I got it. Yeah, because in worker placement games, it's very easy for them to be kind of the same.
Yes.
You know, or like this has a tiny wrinkle. So I was wondering why this game, and I don't know if I know too many worker placement Rondel games. I guess like Zolkin would count as one.
Zolkin probably would count. Trying to think of another one. I'll see a lot of Rondel games are like they might be resource based. So like I'm actually going to review Finca here pretty soon, and that when you march around the Rondel collecting resources.
Right. I just played Finca actually. That was not bad.
Oh, it's a good one. So, but this one is worker placement around the Rondel. And you move around the Rondel collecting, you know, you might get new buildings, you might be able to sell your resources, you might be able to get more workers, all that good worker placement stuff is happening on that shared board. The game is played over 4 seasons or phases. So you play it over 8 years. Each year has a season in it. So all 4 seasons. Some of these can be done simultaneously. Some of them require turns. Each season is outlined on these discs that are flipped over. So you'll flip over the disc and it'll say like spring, summer, fall, winter, like happens every year. And it'll give you like a little special bonus that's going to happen for that season in that year. So it kind of mixes up the years for you. So you have the resources from the fields, and then you put your workers around the city or around the town to do those actions. You can only do one action in the town per round. So that's really tricky because you might, you need that extra building so that you can have an extra worker, because you have to have, proper enough buildings for your workers. But you also need to get some extra, sell your resources for some money so you can buy something else there. So do I do that this round? Do I do that next round? So that kind of creates a nice little puzzle for whenever you're doing the marching around the town. And then at the end of each round, just like any lookout game, you have to feed your people, and you also have...
You do?
You do.
Come on.
And you have to supply fire for them also. So you have to give them food and warmth. So it's like a double whammy.
Oh, man.
So you're going to keep doing this over, I think it's like 8 rounds, 8 years in the game. And then you count up points at the end for like your fenced-in land, number of workers, number of buildings, amount of money, that kind of thing. So it's like, a lot of lookout games, if you look at them, they have like 1 to 4 players, 1 to 6 players, because there's always that solo mode with them. I'm not one that has played a lot of them solo, but it makes sense why you could, because a lot of them are just kind of multiplayer solitaire. You're just trying to get the most points at the end of it. So I can see why this one would work solo, because it is kind of that puzzle where you're trying to, grow the right crops in your fields to be able to trade them to the right buildings in the towns to get you the right money into the right buildings on your homestead. And then you do it again for the next year. And you're just trying to revolve these resources and buildings together.
What do you think
something that really works?
What do you think the Rondel offers that's different? Like that would stand up and make people say, "Oh, I need to try this one."
Yeah. So this game with the Rondel, I would say all the Rondel does in this game is adds a little limitation to the next action you can take, because you can, in effect, you don't have to take the actions in order. You can move to any space as long as it's in front of you on the circle. But if you cross there's these 2 checkpoints. So I think it's a church and the town hall. You have to like give an offering, or you have to pay your taxes, or something like that. Thematically ambiguous. If you cross those checkpoints, then you have to pay. So it kind of slows you down from choosing certain resources. You could, if you had the cash, just keep circling around and doing the same things over and over again. But money's also pretty tight in the game, so you're really not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So it builds in a limitation, so you can't always do everything you want. Which I think good games do that. If you can always do what you want in a game, there may as well not be rules, because you're not solving anything. So I think that's what the Rondel brings to this game, is just that, it slows down and it limits the actions that you can take next.
So my friend, the pod partner Anthony, who's also a Pittsburgh guy, he loves to talk about limitations in games. Like give him clever enough limitations, and he's actually happy. He's also your guy, so I can see that being appealing.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
All right, so that was Walnut Grove. I finally reviewed it. It's one of my white whales. Thank you.
Now you just have to play it.
Is it hard? Is it hard to find?
Oh yeah, I don't think it's been in print since the first print run. So.
All right. So I have actually I was really surprised to find that this game was a little bit newer than I thought, but it definitely feels older. This was a design by our friend Shem Phillips. Shem Phillips from Garfield Games. Very well known for Raiders of the North Sea and Architects of the West Kingdom. Speaking of like games that whenever people ask for worker placement, that's like always going to get like here, Architects of the West Kingdom. I can just like guarantee someone's going to say that. This is not one of those games. This is a game called Bethel Woods. So Bethel Woods was designed in 2016, set in the fictional world of Hours. I don't know what that means. I tried to Google it, Bethel Woods Hours, and it gave me like the museum hours of some place in Piscataway. So it is not. I am so no.
Did he make up the world, or is it like a book or something?
I guess it's a book. I'm not sure. I don't even know. I tried to Google it, and it came up with a museum. So I don't know.
All right.
All right. So, so speaking of like kind of older games, the thing to know about this game, Bethel Woods, I could go into the theme, but like at the Shem Phillips game, the theme doesn't matter. Like, have you played his games, the Raiders and the Shipwrights and all that?
I have not. They've just never. I've never seen them in the wild being played. So.
The themes are like laughably like nothing. Like there's this thing in Architects of the West Kingdom that really annoyed me. Like they're building a citadel and yet they're like arresting each other and throwing each other in jail. And it's like, I thought we were building a city here. This is weird.
Yeah, it makes for nice window dressing though.
But it works mechanically, so that's the idea. So here, there's a lot of like window dressing, but you're not here for that. You're here for the mechanisms, and the mechanism here, speaking of an older game, is a Mancala mechanism. Okay. So you have workers around a border of 6 spaces, and you're going to be picking up these workers and dropping them, kind of Mancala style in the further spaces. As you drop workers, you're going to be quote unquote fixing malfunctions. So these are these tokens which are bad. So they color coordinate. So if you drop a red worker on a red token, you pick up the red token, you get it now. The goal of the game is to bring those workers to the middle. So the middle is like this machine you have to build. Who cares? You have to kind of cash in and uncover 6 tiles. So then the first tile takes 1 token, easy. The second tile takes 2 tokens, a little harder. 3 tokens, 4 tokens, 5 tokens. So that it gets harder and harder. And also it's kind of sucking up your workers, so that also gets harder and harder. So like once you put a worker there, it's gone. And so you have less workers, you have to do more stuff, and the board is doing more things. Like it's kind of filling up Pandemic style with all these tokens. So it begins easy. It's like, okay, this is great. But then you move on and move on and move on, and it's pretty cool. Like I'm not a straight up puzzle guy like that. I'd rather have a little bit more kind of pizzazz and excitement. But I like the puzzle here. I really did. Are you, when it comes to like that, like you spoke about like rondels, like kind of being fun. Like do you like 5 tribes?
I love 5 tribes. Yeah.
And the Mancala mechanism really works there, right?
Yeah, definitely. And Istanbul has something similar, but a little different.
Yeah, where you're like
kind of also.
You have to like account for the spaces in between the space, not just like, one to one. You have to like kind of account for multiple spaces, and where you land will influence your next actions. You're going to have to set things up. So you can't just like do the most obvious best thing. You have to set up for the second round, the third round after that. Has that feeling going to it. There's a lot of randomness to it in the sense that, things can kind of come up and the spaces can malfunction and kind of add extra rules and extra obstacles basically. But the core is that Mancala kind of picking up things, dropping them down. It takes 45 minutes to play. We were talking before the call about like games over an hour, like a no-go for you anymore. So
right, it's true.
It's
very true.
It hits a table very, very easily. I was really surprised. My one limitation with it is that it follows that kind of earlier co-op model where it's not really a co-op game. It's a solo game that like you invite a bunch of people to play. Right. So there's no player pieces. You have you have a character, but it doesn't do much. For the most part, everybody's kind of sharing in the same thing. So it is super, super prone to people bossing you around and, no, do this, no, do that. There's no hidden information. So that's a big buyer beware for a co-op game. But if your group can behave,
right.
if you have a behaving group and everybody enjoys the puzzle, then I can actually give us a big recommendation. So that is Bethel Woods. Are you a Mancala guy? Is that's something that you really enjoy, right?
No, I'm cool with that. Yeah, I used to. My mom and I would play Mancala a lot growing up. So it's. No, I think that whole mechanism. I'm looking at it on Board Game Geek right now. The artwork's really cool.
Yeah.
It says it has variable player powers. You said that's not much of a. The powers aren't really that.
I mean, they don't come in a lot. So like one power will be reduced token to get rid of a spy. But spies aren't on the board all the time. In fact, they're probably on the board maybe, at the end of the game when you're like rushing towards the end. So you're kind of ignoring them anyway. And it's like you may use it 3 times in a game. It's like, okay, that's not a really impactful player power. Most of the time, you're just kind of doing the same thing everybody else is doing. So
yeah, gotcha.
My one limitation on an otherwise excellent family game, that is Bethel Woods.
Cool.
All right. So this last game, I did request, and I knew you would do it. I basically looked. So the way I did it was my big resolution for ENGN this year was to have some more Dice Tower folks on. Tom Vassell is a very, very cool guy. And, ENGN has benefited from being on the Dice Tower network. And I said, you know what? I want about a dozen people on the Dice Tower that have not been on the show before. So like, Dan and Mike from Sporadically Board, Mandy and Suze, their count, they haven't been on the show before. A couple other people, like Jim Bartlett for the Board Game Librarian. So Jordan contacts me. He's like, okay, I'd love to be on the show. And it's like, okay, I want Jordan to talk about a game that he loves. I want him to be excited. I want him to share. I want him to beam with happiness with something. So I went to his page and I looked at all his 10s and I'm like, perfect. This game has a lot of, it's a beautiful game. He's going to tell you about it in a minute. And it has a very well-regarded solo mode, a fan variant that people use for like high scores and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to let you, Jordan, talk about and beam with happiness as you share about this, this game that you may not have heard of.
Okay, here we go. So I do appreciate you extending this to Dice Tower folks. I would call myself a Dice Tower D-list person, but I do appreciate being amongst the stars. So this is Taluva. Taluva is a 2006 game. My copy is the early edition from Rio Grande Games that has a half-naked man on the cover with like a, something covering his crotch.
As one does.
Right. Yeah, yes. With a volcano, it's peering out at a volcano over the ocean. The new cover is super more tasteful. It's like a bunch of trees. But it was designed by Marcel Andre Casaola Merkel. He's also known for Attica or U.S. Telegraph, as is being reproduced this year, and the Pyramid of Penguin, which was just released, which I didn't know he did that, which I thought was really interesting because none of these games are pretty similar at all. But Taluva is it's really just a pretty abstract game. It has kind of that window dressing of a volcanic island that's growing, but it doesn't have to be there. You could easily say that it was designed with these cool looking shapes and they built a game over it.
I think Z Garcia says, could it be a game about goats eating grass?
Oh, easily. Easily. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. You could change the little lakes to goats. You could change, the volcanoes could be the, watering holes. Oh, easily. So in it, you are, it's hard to talk about, but it has these tiles that are made up of 3 hexagons. Each tile has 3 hexagons on it, and they are positioned in a way that kind of look like a triangle, if you can imagine that in your head. Sure. And they all kind of fit together as hexagons do. And every turn you flip over a hexagon just like you would in Carcassonne, and you can place it next to another tile. Now, the thing in Taluva is you can also build on top of other tiles. So you're building an island 3-dimensionally. The tiles are super thick. They're not quite a half-inch thick, but they're super thick. And you are building either across the table or up. In the game, you are placing these tiles, and then the second thing you do is put a building on them. Everybody has 3 buildings. You got your huts, you got your towers, you got your temples, and you're expanding across this landscape that you're building together, and putting the huts on it, expanding the huts to different land tiles. You're building temples in your settlements, and towers can only be built on the 3rd level of each settlement. So it's a good back and forth game. My wife and I play this 2-player a lot. I think for a while it was probably my wife's favorite game. I don't know if it still is, but it used to be my wife's favorite game. In her mind, she always beats me. In my mind, I always beat her. So one of us is right or both of us are wrong. I'm not sure. So we are building this volcanic island, and in order for the game to end, you either run out of tiles or you have to meet one of the other victory conditions with the building. So either you can build all of 2 types of your building. So if you run out of all of your huts and all of your towers, you automatically win. Or if there's a place that you get into a position where you can't build your cities, which I've never seen happen, you would automatically lose. So it's one of those games where it's like a bunch of different kinds of victory conditions, and you have to balance watching your opponents to make sure that they don't meet any of those victory conditions. So there's a lot you have to think about, even though the play is really simple. Place a tile, place a building kind of thing. But you have to watch out for it. So it's like, Seven Wonders Duel, where you can, game ends, person with the most points. But there's also that military victory, and there's also that science victory that you have to keep an eye out for. In Taluva, you just have them all on the table. None of them are really sneaky because everybody's trying to do them all at the same time. You have to make sure, if she's got, she's getting on to the 3rd level to get that tower, and you're like, shoot, she only has 1 tower left. What can I do to build in a way that's going to stop her from doing that? Can I put this tile on top of that other tile to stop her from doing that? Can I place this tile to... because you can place tiles on top of buildings to remove them from the board. Can I remove any of her buildings from the board so she can't reach that space? It's super cool.
I can see the beaming happiness. Look right? At you.
It's super pretty too. The new edition, I think they changed the box art. Frankly, it's a good choice. But the inside of the game is still super beautiful. The artwork on the tiles is really has like a lush feel to it. It has flowers and forests and shrubs and all sorts of stuff. It's all, looking down from the top. But it looks super cool. The wooden pieces are really great. It's really the whole package. It came out in 2006. It just did get reprinted within the last year or two, I think. I think it was Kickstarted. And it deserves to be around. I believe there is an expansion that came out with the Kickstarter, and I've never played that, so I don't know what that adds. But I think, honestly, if you can get a hold of Taluva and you're cool with abstract games, this is like, how people were suddenly cool with abstract games when Azul came out, because it had it was pretty. Taluva is super pretty. It's prettier than Azul, and I think the gameplay is better than Azul. It's very different, but I think it's fantastic.
I think the way I mentioned the solo mode before, I think the way the bot works, and this was a big thing when Morten Monrad Pedersen was starting to do his Automa thing. It has an Automa deck. Okay. And it's a custom Automa deck. So when you talked about moves and should I do this and should I do that and everything. So I think people have kind of figured out how to kind of challenge and push at you the stuff you're building. So okay, you can't build that, or that you cut off that victory track. You have to go to another victory track. So kind of it doesn't. So it's not complicated. Just fire and forget. But it offers that little bit of challenge. So you have to kind of sneak through and figure out the best victory path from there. I love that. There's a lot of games out there. My Takanoko is one of my favorites. There's an Automa for that one. And it doesn't need to be, a huge multiplayer thing. It's okay, just take away my bamboo and and I'm going to have fun eating bamboo or whatever it is. So I looked at this one. I'm really happy you covered it, because I do want games that are good for my wife to play. Yeah. And just hearing you talk about trying to deny your wife victory, it seems like it's a really, really good time.
Yeah, I think that Take That isn't it's not, I don't generally like take that games, but I think when you're playing a game head to head, take that feels different because there's not really another option. I'm not choosing to do something against you. If it's a 4-player game, I'm choosing to do something to this person, and then my next turn I'll choose something to do to that person. In a 2-player game, you can only do things to them.
Right.
So it doesn't, that part doesn't bother my wife and I. If it's a 2-player game and I have to play something to hurt her, she'll just do it right back at me because that's the same, that's the card she had in her deck or whatever. So it is not too take that-y if anybody was concerned about that.
All right, so that was Taluva. You also talked about Walnut Grove, one of my white whales in terms of reviews. I talked about Citadel of Blood, the old adventuring Ameritrash game, and also Bethel Woods, a take on Mancala. Definitely scraping the sides of the gaming universe over here. But, these I think these games are fun. Either they're your niche and they're good for you, or they're just real good games. I think Taluva is one that if it was, kind of re-released a little bit wider, it'd be kind of received very well. Jordan, thank you so much for being on the show. Hope you had fun.
No, thanks, Jason. This was awesome. Thanks.
All right. If anybody wants to interact with you, you mentioned your Instagram before. What's your account?
Yeah, it's at second_chance_shelf. Hopefully you can figure that out. That's on Instagram. Don't bother finding me on YouTube. Just find me on Instagram. You'll find me on YouTube later. So.
Well, you're on Board Game Breakfast too. So,
I am. I try to do a video every week as much as I can, and I'll probably be popping up on some other Dice Tower stuff coming up too.
All right. Thank you very much, Jordan.
Cool.
Well, you'll definitely not be a stranger. If I have other older games that I need to, wheel you on back for, then, or if you have something that you really like burning to talk about, then, just hit me up. I'm always looking for content. You know that, man. Weekly is hard.
It is. I'm here.
Weekly is hard.
Cool.
All right. Take care, man.
All right. Thanks, Jason.
That was Jordan Shoenberger from Second Chance Shelf over on the Dice Towers Board Game Breakfast. Thank you so much to him. It was a period right before I moved, and I had a whole bunch of episodes recorded just so I would be covered because I knew that this move would be very, very taxing. It has been. I can't even describe. It's 2 months out. This is me live. I'm recording it a couple days before the episode post. This episode was recorded many, many months ago. So it's finally done. I'm finally settled in, and now I can look forward. But before I do, I just want to say thank you to Gary Pope, to Liz Davidson, to Tommy, Ray, to a bunch of people who stepped up and helped with episodes so that I can get this thing going, keep the weekly schedule. And now it is all about looking forward. From now on, we are going to be doing a pile of episodes covering Gen Con releases from 2019. Not just Gen Con, but like delivered Kickstarters and just a whole pile of games. I mean, last year, our post-Gen Con wrap-up lasted about 6 episodes. It's going to be the same this time. So, calling upon some friends once again. Next week, you will hear the voices of the One Stop Co-op Shop, particularly Colin and Steve. They were here last year, and they're back again. And then we're going to welcome back Anthony. Yes, Anthony is still a part of the Every Night is Game Night family. If you want to hear his content every week, you can go over to BoardGamersAnonymous.com. He'll be stopping by over the next couple of weeks after Colin and Steve to talk about all the Gen Con games, all the rolling rights. 1 year out, I continue to not get the fascination with like a billion rolling rights. I can understand 1 or 2, whatever. We'll get into that in a couple of weeks. So very, very excited about what's coming, all the pile of games. And then after that, it'll be October, November, and then top 100 solo that Kevin Erskine does. I have another plan for that. So I'm thinking about stuff. I'm trying to make this show the best that it possibly can. And like I said, next week I'll have an announcement in terms of trying to up the fan interaction. So stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for next week. So until then, go ahead and grab a solo game off of that shelf, and let's make every night a game night.